The parts have come in for this Kenmore. What I ended up ordering was a different piece. It's actually for a Kenmore 148 and 158 style machine, but it's the correct diameter. It's a 51 millimeter race width there. The top guard there on this race isn't quite the same as the original, but I bought it and tested it out. The hook fits perfectly, and that hook race cover clips in place just like it should. This is me checking the fit on it, and then I had to get out the little plastic clips to hold the race on and reinstall those. So I put everything in a baggie, in separate baggies to keep the screws together. So I dug out the plastic tab clips that hold the race on the front, and got that reinstalled. And then once those spring clips were in place, I was able to put a needle in and start checking the fit for this piece. Again, the front race I found is not a direct replacement because the 385 12912 I couldn't find that part, but I measured the hook race for 51 millimeters, and that's the size of this 158 148 Kenmore section. Once I got it in place, I put a needle in and went to check the needle travel, and I discovered that the needle wasn't going into the hook race properly. So here's a close-up view. Remember that hook race had been completely out of alignment, and I just checked to see if I could rotate it to get it in alignment before I started ordering parts. And then I ordered this, and it fit, so now we have to realign that hook race. And it's the two set screws, the end and the bottom, and then just gently rotating it. When I was lining this up, I had it set for the straight stitch center needle position, and I kept pushing the needle bar to the left, and I lined up the hook of the race, or that little guard piece hole for the center, and then it extended to the right, or left rather. When I pushed it over, that fit in that hole in the guard on top of the hook race. Later, once I got this set up here and started checking the stitch width, I discovered an issue. But I have that rotated to where I wanted it to, and now it's time to get the feed dog back in place. Getting the feed dogs and the plate in place was challenging. I'm certain a better way of doing this, or a smarter way to line that all up. But what I ended up doing was just trial and error. I put the feed dogs in, and then I set the feed plate in, and I was just lining it up loosely here without the screws in place, and thought it was close to lined up, but we will see shortly here. That once I installed the screws to hold the feed plate in place, the first time I had the dogs installed, they were a little crooked, and so what happened is the feed dog was rubbing on the plate and catching, and the feed dogs are moved mechanically forward and backward, but they're only spring-loaded for up and down, so they get pushed up by the cam motion, but then they rely on spring to be pulled down. So here they're not square to the feed plate, and you'll be able to see as I check here, see they stick in place and stay stuck up instead of retracting down, and that's because they're rubbing on the feed plate. So I ended up just having to trial and error the installation, taking the feed plate off, adjusting the feed dogs ever so slightly, and then putting the feed plate back in and testing the fit to make sure that the feed dogs were free and clear of the plate and all squared up and centered in it. So again, there might be a better way to do this, but I don't know what it is. And it was a lot of fiddly work to get that done. However, after several attempts, I was finally able to get the feed dog lined up with the plate there, and then it was moving freely finally. So I put a few dabs of oil in across everything, and now it's time to check the needle travel. So I lined the center position needle up on that space in the top of the hook race guard, and now I'm checking each stitch to see the needle travel and make sure it's not hitting anything. But I pretty quickly discovered that the zigzag was hitting on the right hand side, so I triple checked that I had the hook race centered, and it was lined up with the center line for the straight stitch, but the hole in the top of that guard isn't wide enough for the zigzag stitches for full width. So to test the machine, I'm just taking the guard off. You can see that gap by the arrow is the part that isn't wide enough. It's only about half as wide as it needs to be. If I remember correctly, the Singer 158 is a side-loading machine. So the reason why it's a zigzag machine but it doesn't need a bigger gap on this part is because the bobbin case moves left to right to stay in line with the needle on the zigzag. So it's more like a straight stitch machine than a modern zigzag, or than a front loading zigzag. So with that guard off, I got full motion on the stitches, and once I had that tested out, it's time to put the case back on. And the presser foot lift lever needs to go all the way up and get pushed way up to get through the hole in the back of the case. And then make sure that I line up the 2 holes under the handle. And then after I got the case partially on, I realized that the feed dog plate interferes with getting the case on. So I took the feed plate off, and once the feed plate was removed, I was able to get the screws back in. The removal video for getting the case off shows carefully finding all the screws. Once you know where they are, putting them back in is, reverse of disassembly. And I was careful and tried to leave a lot of screws in, and then, like I said, I bagged screws up to make sure I got the right ones in place. The one that's hard to remember is the deep one in the back of the machine here, way down at the tip of the screwdriver. Out of view from the bad lighting, there's one screw that holds the back of the case in the center there. And then there's that screw that goes through a tab from the front and rear of the case, and 2 tabs on the bottom here. And then the screw that I found, or that I had that I couldn't remember for the longest time where it went, was a plastic screw, and that plastic thread screw is the one that went inside the free arm next to the bobbin case in the back. There's a metal tab, and this is me checking the seam on the case inside under the arm there, gently loosening things and so that they can move around a little bit when I push the pieces together. So once the back was in place, then I could put the base cover back on, because it covers 2 of the screws that hold the back cover in place. And then once the 4 screws on the bottom are in place, then the motor cover can go on. And the motor cover snaps in place across the top, and then there's 1 screw that holds the bottom of it. It's always hard to get that to those tabs to snap in place, but eventually there, get them all to pop in. And like this one, I just gave it a little pry in place. So once I had all the covers back on, I left that guard piece off the top of the race and went on to test the machine. You'll notice I don't have a light bulb in it right now, and I'm gonna have to find a lamp and put that in. I discovered the lamp I had was broken, So that is going to get added in on the list of things that need to be taken care of to finish this machine up. But for now, the next thing is to do some stitch tests.